So I have a short 30-minute presentation, I think 10 slides. And what I want to do is cover this very, very difficult topic of creating a data-driven culture. Because all this data and technology coolness is great, but this is very, very hard to pull off. It's really hard to fundamentally change the culture in your organization, especially organizations that are big. It actually gets much harder the bigger they are. In fact, I find that it's not unusual for me to go and give a talk and show all these testings, many of the testing experiments. And for the most part, lots and lots of tests and experiments are actually being done by small companies. Actually, the bigger the company, the dumber it is in terms of it getting to a cutting edge. It really is. And I think it's something about the culture and something about the pace at which they can move and the bureaucracy and the agility that gets lost when you get big. So it's sort of an interesting little problem. This topic is also in the book, so you can read more because I will run through this quickly. So you all have a book, which is great. It's very heavy. It took me a long time to write. My publisher, Wiley, they just called me in September or October and said, after 6 months I had started blogging, and they said, we should make this into a book. And I said, who the hell would want to pay for a thing that's already free? It turns out that a lot. But the core reason that I decided to write the book is that all of the proceeds that I make from the book actually go to 2 charities. And so I actually, my wife and I decided that everything we make from the book will go to 2 charities. And the first one is Doctors Without Borders. It's a Swiss charity that does some really amazing work around the world. They're a charity that's known to be first in every sort of troubled spot in the world. And they won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2003, which is an amazing charity. We love it. And the other half of my proceeds go to the Smile Train, which is a charity that does cleft palate surgery in the third world. It's a pretty terrible condition, emotionally, not physically, emotionally, for a child to go through. And it only costs $50 to actually do the surgery. So we support the Smile Train. So thanks to Brett and Google, you all get a book. I think, my unbiased opinion, this is an awesome book. but it also raises money for charity, which is something that's great about a book. So lots of things you've heard today. Hopefully you get lots of ideas and you're excited to go back and do things. And often people think, oh, everything's easy. I'm just going to go and I'm just going to do it. And a bunch of them are. And lots of things that I especially talked about this morning with the GA talk. You saw how easy it is to do these things. But often, we have to have an inspirational quote. But often things are actually not quite straightforward. Life is tough. And I'm a huge fan of Guy Kawasaki. You'll see me thanking him in the preface of the book. And this is a quote that I take from Guy Kawasaki. And it's true. If you want to roast duck, you have to work for it. Nothing is easy in life. And I think this quote captures it very well. So I'm going to go through 5 things that I have come to learn during my experience that help create a data-driven culture, because it's hard to get it right, but you can. And the very first lesson that I had learned is always focus on the outcomes, especially at the outset. And I like to say the story that when I first got to my former employer, they were using Web Trends. And they were publishing 300 Web Trends reports. And so I walked around. I did not know anything about web analytics. It's embarrassing. Just a few years ago, I knew nothing. And so I met everybody for 2 weeks, started figuring out what this web thing is. And this was just 4 years ago. It's more embarrassing. And then at the end of my second week, I simply turned off Web Trends. I simply switched it off. And No one in this $2 billion company actually called me. Not a single human being called me. And it was not that Web Trends is a bad tool. Web Trends is actually a pretty good tool. It's that all of this massive data puking did not focus on outcomes. Because at the end of the day, all of us are motivated by outcomes, either outcomes for yourself or outcomes for the company. So it's really, really important that if you want to start or end up with creating a culture that thrives on data, you have to connect to people at a very, very deep level. And there is nothing deeper than focusing on figuring out how I, as the person, director of analytics, can help you make more money by getting you a bigger bonus. People respond to you helping them improve their salaries. No amount of visitor trends help John improve his salary. The amount of orders I get from Jelly Beans improves his salary. And my job as the director of data is to figure out how I can help him sell more Jelly Beans. So at the end of the year, he will get a higher bonus. It seems kind of odd, but tons of reports that said out there, don't focus on outcomes. The very first thing we did is we said we're going to hack together a data warehouse, quick data warehouse, and all it will report is on one number. How much revenue did we make? And the very first time we put this number in front of the CEO, it shocked him and he hired a VP. And the reason he hired a VP because he was surprised at how much money we were making on the web. And so he hired a VP for the web because the web was that important to the company. And remember, they had 300 Web Trends report available all of this time, and yet they had no idea what the outcomes were. So at the start, create a simple dumb graph that plots revenue. Each color in this stacked bar represents a product. I'm not going to tell you what, obviously. But it helps them understand two simple things. How much money do we make? What are we selling? Everybody responds to that. Because it's the bottom line. So as you focus, as you go back, if you want to prioritize the actions you want to take, the first filter that you should put on is, am I reporting on bottom line? Because people care about bottom lines, theirs and the company's. Then you'll be ready to go back and say, after a few months of doing this, they're like, oh, why are we making so much money? Where are people coming from? They're ready for this. And then at some point they'll say, I know Google is great, or whatever this is saying. Then they're ready to say, what is happening on my website that is causing me to make money? It's a gradual transition. What happens in reality in many companies is, it's easy to throw a tag on the website and you start going the reverse way. It increases complexity and there's less skin in the game for people you're working with. Solve for outcomes. And you will create a culture that will demand data. I'll give you another great example. The first time we did a test at Intuit, we built a platform and ran a test, actually for Quicken. John's from Quicken. And we created a test for Quicken, and it was a simple test. 3 different hero images is as simple a test as you can get. And what I said at the time is, why don't we bet on it? So we have this idea, 3. Let's everybody bet on which one is going to be the winner. Only $1 each. Everybody had skin in the game. The next day, as we learned a few in the earlier presentation for Tom, you get data. The next day, everybody was checking in to see if they're going to win the pool. Because they had skin in the game. And people would come up to me and say, oh, I think, what's the definition of this conversion rate thing you're measuring? I'm not winning. I think this is wrong. Great, right? People got skin in the game. And everybody was interested in knowing how multivariate testing worked. They all wanted to know what the winner was going to be. And by the way, they all lost. The guy who created the techie guy won, because the interesting thing is, when we said, in order to win the pool, you have to predict which recipe would win and by how much. And so they all predicted it's sort of easy to say which recipe might win. But then everybody said, improvement in conversion rate will be 45%, 50, 19, 28. The improvement in conversion was 1%. Important lesson learned, right? You do small things, you win small. But all of this happened because we focused on outcomes. This is another very, very important thing, and the reason that I think a lot of companies fail. The smartest people in each company are probably sitting in this conference room, sadly. But you are. You're the smartest people in the company because you know data, and you want to play with data, and you want to use data to make decisions. In some sense, you already get it. But yet I find that, especially as you approach the hippo level, people have a deep distrust for data. Here is the other facet of this problem. You know every nuance of how the data is collected, processed, and presented. You are the smartass. And when you present data up, remember the person on the other end of the table or the phone is not as smart as you are about data. They obviously got there because they have other attributes. They're not that smart about data. So what happens is a lot of times they'll say, oh, you're saying this thing is bad about this recipe, or oh, this campaign is not working. They think it's your opinion. It's very, very, very important that if you want to create a culture where people use data, you have to depersonalize decision making. It cannot be your opinion about something, not even remotely. If people think it is your opinion and you're not a very nice person, you're screwed. There are lots of simple ways to depersonalize decision making. Every single report you put out, you should pass through this filter. Does this report meet the criteria that this is not my opinion, this is data speaking? So a simple way to do it is something that I had shown you many screenshots had this morning. Give context. We got 1 million people this month and it is bad. Oh, it is bad because last month we had 3. And we have 3 million versus 1 million. So you do a simple graph that says, the blue is how we did last year, and the red is how we're doing this year. Right? Or the red is the goal, and the green is how we're doing. This is not your opinion anymore. Whether the performance is good or bad is not your opinion anymore. Depersonalize it. Or you can compare it to other benchmarks and indexes. Like, for example, you cannot go to your CEO and say, we suck at 1% conversion. But you can tell him, shop.org just published a study that says that an average e-commerce retailer, top 300, converts at 2.3%. And our conversion is 1%. The message that you suck is included. But it is not your opinion, right? It's a lot of analysts make this mistake. A, because they are smart, they can do math, and they portray data as their own opinion, and it's not. Another one is, I am a huge fan of doing surveying. And so this is the American Customer Satisfaction Index. You can go to theacsi.org, and you can actually get satisfaction scores for the last 10 odd years for any company you want. So if you're running a customer satisfaction survey, you can say to your CEO, our score is 53, and Marriott is 79. Or, Marriott is only 79, we're 96. You get a bonus right away, obviously. Because it's not your opinion anymore. And that's the same reason that I like testing and experimentation, because it's not your opinion. You will always lose against the hippo. You have no chance of winning, or very little. But it's easy to say, let's put it up there, A, B, and C, and see which one wins. In this case, that's the control. That's the one I like. It's clean and it has a heart. Angels are missing. It's clean, right? The interesting thing is, the woman cooing soft nothing into the guy's ear did not work. This did not work either. It's the woman and what appears to be an androgynous person winning. Right? And if that was your idea, your hippo would have never accepted it. But now it's not your opinion. It's the customers voting. In all examples, whether you create index against yourself, you compare against others, or you're in testing and experimentation, all you're doing is depersonalizing decision making. You have to take the people around the table out of the equation. It's not our opinion. And then it turns out people are more willing to listen. People listen to customers. Most reasonable hippos listen to customers. and they listen to the bottom line. They listen to comparisons to others in the industry. But they don't want to listen to you, not as much as you like. And the other one, obviously, is if you want to actually create a data-driven culture, you have to figure out how to empower your analysts. I mentioned this morning that there is a huge difference between doing reporting and analysis. Reporting means everybody gets the data and nobody takes any action. But everybody gets the data. If you actually want to create a culture where you want to have a lot of data being used to drive decisions, you have to figure out how to empower analysts in your team. You have to make sure that they have 20% time for reporting, 40%, 70% time for doing unstructured analysis. If you don't allow people to go explore and find insights, how are you actually going to create a culture that thrives on data? Reports are not going to tell you what to do by themselves. And the other important thing is if you do have analysts, encourage a culture of risk-taking. I am astounded that people hire an analyst for $100,000 a year and then make him into a reporting monkey. Right? Or they will get somebody from Harvard and Yale, and then rather than letting this extremely brilliant person with a PhD do the kinds of analysis that he has learned to do, they will say, take A, multiply it by B, and then divide it by C, and that is what you will do day and night. And that's not how you create a culture that thrives on data. You take risk, and you do big things. And the reason is this wonderful little graphic. It is actually amazingly true. When you touch data, you have absolutely no idea how big your problems are. If you don't take risk, if you don't spend time on doing unstructured analysis, you're actually not going to be able to figure out how big your problems are. And the next one is this philosophy that I have. It's called the Trinity strategy. It's covered in the book in some detail, but it was developed after a little while of sort of me thinking through all of the problems around the web, especially the web. And in the center of the Trinity strategy is what I had said this morning. It's the desire to find actionable insights and metrics that drive change, not data. And one facet of the Trinity strategy is doing clickstream analysis. What you would do with Google Analytics, right? Lots of clickstream analysis. Is understanding the click patterns of people. And that's good. But it's important to realize that there are a lot of weird people in the world. And they all have ADD. And they are all using your website. It's astonishingly sad, but it is true. So as you analyze trends and patterns in your clickstream data, it is not unusual for you to struggle to find a semblance of insight, because people do weird crap on your site. So when you attack clickstream analysis, the important thing to remember is you're inferring intent. And hence, the second element of the Trinity is really important to do outcomes analysis. If you have a support website, figure out how to measure problem resolution rates. If you have an e-commerce website, figure out how to measure revenue. If you have a lead generation website, figure out how to measure conversion. But the second element of the Trinity is to analyze outcomes. But the thing that I have learned that creates data-driven culture is this number 3, which is experience analysis. It's doing testing, experimentation, lab usability studies, surveys, all of these wonderful things that help you get into the head of all these people who have ADD. Is me trying to get into your head as you're clicking around on our site to figure out, what the hell are you thinking? And there are many simple and complex ways of doing it. You could simply run a survey, right? You could run a survey and say, hey, what do you think? You could do tests. That's a way of getting into a customer's head and say, what is going to work for you? But another way is doing remote. There's this company in San Francisco called Ethnio, E-T-H-N-I-O. It's a great company. And the wonderful thing about Ethnio is you can buy their services and then show a DHTML window on your site as people come. And you say, would you like to make $50? Everyone does. Who doesn't want $50? And if you say yes, they fill out a quick short survey, say, what's your age group, or what products do you use, how long have you used our site, do you use our competitor site, anything you want. As soon as you meet the criteria, you say, fill out your information, say yes, it comes over to this live database, and I have your phone number to call you. And I call you and I say, hey, John, you wanted $50. No, I don't say that. You wanted to participate in a study with us. So you press this button and boom, I can see exactly your browser window. I teach them to think aloud for 2 minutes. Say, hey, here's how you think. Right? I mean, whatever you're doing, just tell us. And then we sit back, relax, and let the person go. Say, do whatever you're doing on our site. And it will blow your mind when you see the person behaving on your site, telling you what they're thinking or what they're looking for, and them struggling to actually solve their problem. It gives you amazing insight into a person's head as to what they're thinking. And often you want to cry. Very often you want to cry. Because the interesting phenomenon about human beings is that a lot of these people who participate in these experiments, often if they are not able to complete their task, I want a prize, I want to order something, I want to give a lead gen, I want to know how much this product costs, they tend to blame themselves very quickly. And they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm such an idiot, I can't do this simple thing. The reality is you are the idiot for making this human being feel bad. You should have figured out how to get the price in front of them really quickly. That's doing experience analysis. There is a lot that it takes to understand the experience of your customer so that you can understand the behavior that they have on the site. And the goal of the Trinity strategy is to understand the experience so well using all these methodologies so you can influence their behavior, which leads to the right outcomes. That's the goal. As you go out and want to create a data-driven culture in your companies, remember, this is what you have to solve for. And the reason is because at the end of the day, we're not analyzing cookies and sessions and JavaScript tags and other BS like that. We're actually trying to solve for people. And it is very, very often that we all forget that we're analyzing people. Some of them are frightened by you, obviously, as this woman on the left, right? Other people love you, other people are screwing with you. And your goal as you do all of the analysis, when you log into Google Analytics tomorrow morning, which all of you will, yes? Is to try and figure out and remember that you're solving for people and you're trying to analyze people and not cookies. Because it's so easy in our web world to just forget that you're actually analyzing people. The last one is a particular point of view of mine, is that web analytics over the last few years has evolved tremendously. Decision making on the web has evolved tremendously. We started with log files and analog, which is one of the old log file parsers that's still around. My personal point of view is that web analytics as a responsibility should sit with the business and not the IT team. It sounds crazy, but in a lot of companies, web analytics is still owned by IT teams. And that's okay, you know. But the interesting thing I have found is that IT people have completely and utterly different requirements from data than do business people. As the web has matured and become an integral part of any business, it's no longer IT that is driving the website. It is the business team and the marketer that are driving websites. So my personal point of view is the person who should own web analytics in your company is the person whose neck is on the line if the site fails to deliver for the customer. Sometimes it's somebody in strategy, in operations. Often I find a lot of organizations meeting success by having web analytics owned by marketing, because marketing is responsible for creating the experience. You can figure out what is the right outcome for your own company, but it is important to realize that it is probably an optimal outcome to have business-owned data and decision-making from data. Because of this one singular reason, is you have to think, imagine, and move at the pace of business. And the pace at which a business moves is radically different from a pace at which IT moves. And it's not that one is better than the other, but they're both solving for different things. And so I have this complex graphic that you should not read, that I will do as a part of an hour presentation. But rather than having a lot of different silos on pieces of the puzzle, from collecting data all the way to making decisions in your companies, because of all of the transformations with JavaScript tags and ASP models and hosted vendors, a lot of this complexity is going out of the equation now. So you can stuff a lot of things to the vendor and create a responsibility in your company that is end-to-end and owned by the business. It's really, really important that if you want to create a data-driven culture, that you have a data team, an analytics team that is owned by the business and reports to the business, because they will make sure that they kick them enough so that they're doing the right thing. That's it.